Look, I'm just going to say it how it is. We're all living through a slow motion robbery. Not with guns, not with masks, with spreadsheet, meetings, and policy decisions. The people at the top broke the money system on purpose. They're printing too much, bail out their buddies, and pushing every crisis further down the road. And now they're quietly building a new system for themselves while telling you and I everything is under control. If you feel like your paychecks buy less, your saving never catch up, and you always one step behind, that's not personal failures. That's the design. And the reset, the planning, that's how they make sure they don't pay for the bill for what they did. Let's be real about who we're talking about here. This is not some random market forces thing. This is central banker, financial minister, and the political class that signed off on every bailout, every money printing experiments, every temporary emergency program that never rolled back. They're the ones who turns the dollar, the euro, and every other fiat currencies into a melting ice cube. They're the ones who told you a 2% inflation is good for you while your rent went up 30% and your grocery bill doubled. And when their own system started to crack back in 2008, in 2020, every time there was a wobble, the answer was always the same. Print more, paper it cover, push the pain into the futures. Now the future is here, and instead of admitting they blew it, they're trying to quietly rewrite the rules. Think about your life. Did anyone ask you if you were okay with the currency losing 10, 20, 40% of its purchasing power over a decade? Did anyone ask you were okay with your taxes bail out giant corporations, zombie banks, and hedge funds that took stupid risks? Of course not. You just woke up one day and the prices were higher, the fees were higher, and the cost of living was higher. And they told you to work harder, budget better, maybe skips the latte. Meanwhile, the same people lecturing you about responsibility or flying private jets to conferences to talk about inclusive finance while they decide how's the next versions of money is going to work without you in the room. Here's what pisses me off the most. They broke the system and now they get to design the reset. They're building extra layers of money only governments and big institutions can access. They're pulling physical gold back into their own vaults. They're quietly stacking bitcoins from seizures and strategic reserve. So when the music stops, they'll be sitting on hard assets and special privileges, and you'll be sitting with cash in the bank that can be frozen, inflated away, or moved to some new digital system where every transaction is tracked and your access depends on whether you behave. That's the reset. Same player, more controls, and less freedom for everyone else. Look, I'm not saying this to scare you for views. I'm saying this because if we talk about this like robots, nothing changes. The truth is, never meant to win these games as its currency is set up. These rules were written to protect debt, big institutions, and governments first. You and I are somewhere near the bottom of the list. You save in their money, they print more. You pay taxes in their money. They devalue it. They hold your cash in their banks. They get bailout when they screw up. And you get maybe 0.5% interest while inflation eats 10%. And now instead of admitting, yeah, we abuse the system, we printed too much, we lie about inflation, we let assets bubbles run wild, they're just quietly steering us into a new version of the same scam with nicer branding and more surveillance. Let's call it what it is. It's gaslighting. They tell you inflation is transitory when you can literally see the price tags changing in front of your eyes. It's death. When they print trillions and your salary stays the same, the gaps didn't come from nowhere. It came from your future's purchasing power. It's cowardice because instead of taking responsibilities and saying, we can't fix this, without real pain at the top. They just spread the pain out over everyone who uses the currency. They never call it death. They call it policy. They never call it reset. They call it reform, modernizing, upgrading the system. But you and I know what it looks like when somebody changes the rules in the middle of the games to save themselves. And here's where I get a little fired up about Bitcoin, gold, and real asset. Because for the first times in our lives, we actually have a ways to step outside the games, at least partially. Gold was always the old school ways to say, I'm not playing your paper money games. Real estate, if you own it outright, can be another way. But Bitcoin, that's the new version. That's digital global, hard capped, and not controlled by any central bankers having a bad day. So while they're busy designing the next versions of the system, you actually have the options to build your own little parallels balance sheets in something they can't print and don't truly control. I'm not blaming you if you don't see it this sooner. Most people never taught how monies really work. The school systems doesn't explain central banking. Nobody sits you down and say, here's how inflation's quietly transfer wealth from the bottoms to the tops. You were told to go to school, get a job, save in the bank, invest in retirement plans, and trust the experts. That's the script, but at some point you have to look at the result and admit the script is broken. Wages flat, cost is up, debt is up, anger is up, and the same people who broke it are now smiling on TV telling you they're going to manage the transition. So no, this is not your fault. But now that you see it, it is your responsibilities to decide what you're going to do about it. If you're pissed, good, you should be, because all of this polite, sensitized language about resets and new monetary architectures is just a mask for every basic questions. Who pays for the mistake? Who gets bailout? Who gets left holding the bag? You write out the resets in the weakest positions, fully exposed us to whatever new rules they roll out. If you decide to move even slow, you change the script. You start stacking some Bitcoin. You build a positions in hard assets you actually understand. You reduce how much of your life is denominated in their melting currencies. Is that going to magically fix everything overnight? No, but it means that when the reset really kicks in, you're not standing there with a handful of promises and nothing's real. So here's what I said. If we were just sitting at the table, no camera, no audience, the people who broke the system are not going to save you. They are going to save themselves. They already are. They are not losing sleep over your rent, your grocery bill, your savings. They are losing sleep over the balance sheets, their powers, their controls of the system. And this reset is about making sure they keep that power in the other side of the storm. Look, you don't have to play along. You don't have to be the last one holding the paper. You can step outside little by little into asset they can't just conjure out of thin air. If you do nothing, nothing changes. If you start moving, even with small amount, even slowly, you are no longer just a victim of whatever resets they're cooking up. You are someone who saw what was happening and choose not to sit there and take it. That's the difference. If you want to keep talking about this, not in fake TV language, but like real people trying to navigate a rigged game. Stick around, hit subscribe, and let's keep pulling the mask off this thing together. All right? I hope to see you in the next video. All right? Take care.